On today's 7th Circle Gaming, we analyze Europa Universalis 4, EU4, and we'll get started here, like we always do, with full disclosure, and we'll normally invite you to pause the video at this point, read through all of these at your leisure. On this particular video, because there is some DLC installed, we do invite you to, or we do suggest, pausing the video and reading through all of these. However, if you prefer still not to, we'll just jump right into the screenshots. And the first one that we're going to share with you is the start of the game when players initially select New Game Mode. And of particular note on this page are the left-hand side of the screen, where the player is going to have the option of selecting a couple of pre-chosen start points, starting years, or choosing their own custom starting year. And in addition to that, on the lower left-hand corner of the screen are the options menus. More on that later. Now we move on to the top of the screen, the top middle of the screen, wherein the buttons to display the different map modes can be found. And on the bottom of the screen for any given time period, the game is going to suggest a couple of interesting countries to play as. And now then, since that's really all there is to say about this screen, let's move on to screenshot number 2. And in screenshot number 2, we want to highlight the complexity on offer and how the game attempts to render that complexity or that statistics. What we're looking at is during a playthrough as the 13 colonies, the United States, if you'd prefer, the trade screen. And trade is managed in this game through influence over particular trade nodes. Points on the map where various lines cross, basically. And countries can either add value to or collect money from in-game currency from that trading node. There's an awful lot to more complexity about that and understanding of how to manipulate that. But for right now, all we want to communicate is the amount of complexity that entails. In addition to that, we'll also draw your attention to the user interface. A lot of information is displayed in a very small area, that being the top left corner of the screen, wherein can be found the icon for the player country, and most of the economic and social indicators for the player's country. In addition, the notifications bar can also be found. Those are the sort of banner flag looking things with the different icons on them. Clicking on those will provide additional information. On the right hand side of the screen is another sort of notifications bar and the map modes button, where it can be found the option to display the map as a geographic, political, or trading, or various other map modes. All a very complicated user interface with some things that are clickable and will open other menus. Some items are not. All in all, an awful lot of complexity on offer. Or rather, to put it another way, control over the player's country. And now then, let's move on to our next screenshot, which is the options menu. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but for now, what's most important is to communicate where this can be found. This is back on that new screen or new game screen, and we found this by clicking on the options menu, not necessarily the game options menu. And this is the only time players are going to have any chance of influencing the rules of the game world that they're about to create. And with that, let's move on to chapter 1, which is Immersion. And herein we must assess that Europa Universalis 4 has earned a 4.5 out of 15. It does use statistics focus to get players invested into the game world in a very significant way. A large portion of the game is going to be manipulating statistics, and there's certainly a lot of them to examine and understand to maximize success potential. Right, and that's all the buzzwords that we're going to throw around. Next, the game is going to be using presentation to get players invested into the game world. There's artistic but not entirely unrealistic rendering of the globe, and obviously some downloadable content can add to that or add to the cultural specificity of the game. And in addition, the game can be said to be using player agency to get players invested into the game world. However, largely this is going to take the form of players being able to shape the development of their chosen country and, by extension, the world through their actions. Well, finally, the game could be said to be using challenge to get players invested into the game world, and this is going to vary significantly by country and can be tactically challenging. However, in EU4, we aren't necessarily referring to a militarily challenging game. We're more referring to a political tactics rather than military. So then, with that said, and not wishing to give too much away, let's move on to difficulty. And here, EU4 has earned, and rather appropriately, a 4 out of 15. It does have options for difficulty selection, but these are not readily apparent. Where they are located can be somewhat difficult to find, nor are they really completely described as we might like to see. Country choice and the time period that the player is choosing will also have a significant impact on difficulty. During all of our evaluation sessions, we were struck by the thought that there were very possibly some hidden statistics and hidden properties that were also going to impact difficulty. Certainly, it seemed that there were some alliances and treaties that we weren't made aware of. There is a tutorial for players that choose to engage with it. It is highly suggested that most players do. It's not going to be utterly complete, but it will at least provide players with their grounding in the general principles. The DLC will have some impact on that. However, we're going to postpone our discussion of the DLC policy for the overall score. Right now, we will just add that the user interface is particularly complex, and this can lead to players missing information that could be particularly significant, or focusing on information that is not significant in any way. And with that, let's move on to the overall, or to the lasting appeal, rather. And again, we see EU4 earning a 4 out of 15. While it does have multiple countries and start times to select from, during all of our evaluation sessions, we didn't uncover significant variance among them. Certainly, some countries had different specifics, but the general principles were roughly the same. However, EU4 does have a healthy modding community with a significant amount available both through the Steam Workshop and through third-party sources. There is also a substantial amount of downloadable content available. Again, we'll be talking about the DLC later, so we'll postpone that discussion for now. We will say that at this point, the mod support is really what's pushing the game into that 4 out of 15. And now then, let's move on to the overall score. Overall, EU4 has earned a 4.16 out of 15. During our evaluation sessions, we did believe that it's very possible that self-immersion may be required for the game. The game doesn't necessarily grab the player. However, again, this is going to kind of depend on the chosen country and the chosen time period. And for that reason, we will add that interest in the time period, roughly 1400 to 1800, may aid immersion and appeal. This is largely for those history and political science students who have something of an idea of what happened during that period. During our evaluation sessions, it did seem that there were long periods of nothing happening. Most of what we spent our time doing was investing into the development of various regions in different ways. Certainly, time dilation could address those, but then we might miss certain details that we would rather not have missed later on. One could say that the game is punishing aggressive gameplay, that referring to those hidden statistics that we mentioned earlier. And now finally, it's time for that large discussion of downloadable content. Now, we did start initially evaluating this game in the vanilla mode with no downloadable content except that which was offered free. And then we chose to evaluate the game a second time with the starter pack downloadable content. And while we did uncover some additional complexity, we didn't necessarily uncover any additional substantial content. And based on that, we would say that while much has been said over the past decades about the downloadable content policy of Paradox Game Studios, without wishing to cast aspersions, that in the case of EU4, what is being added is additional complexity without adding additional content. There is additional immersion added through the culture packs, but to say that the downloadable content makes it significant or changes the game utterly doesn't necessarily seem an accurate statement. Of course, we will caveat that in all that we just said as being highly subjective, so grains of salt over both shoulders, and whatever else you prefer to do. And with that, I really don't think there's anything else to say about EU4, although you are very welcome to share your opinions in the comments section below, or if you would like to, you can now buy me a coffee through the link that we'll provide from 7th Circle Gaming. Goodbye.